Hi, I'm Doug from Global West. What we're going to talk about here is step one in removing bind from the rear suspension of a 64 through 72 A bodies, which is Chevelle, GTO, Le Mans. We'll go ahead and throw a list up on the screen here for you. Now, these happen to be rear lower control arms, and we have three different types here. The one most popular, which is what you're going to use on the street, is this TBC4. This particular control arm here has got a bearing system that attaches to the frame, and then we have the dowel loom bushing system which goes to the differential side, and then this hardware that we have here in this little step in the control arm is actually for the factory sway bar. So these arms are used as a direct replacement for the 64 to 72. These other two control arms that we have here are used, they are a direct replacement as well, but in a different sense. They do not have a sway bar attachment. This particular one here's a TBC42. Now this has got the bearing system, again at the frame location with the dowel loom in the rear. And we use this in our coilover kits for the rear suspension because the new coilover system we have using the Penske shock absorber, the sway bar in the rear mounts differently. In a racing environment, just so you know, we normally don't run a rear sway bar unless it's a drag car, but sometimes on the street the rear sway bar will work depending on your application. So we do make one for that, but it doesn't go to the lower control arm. And then we have this version here, which is an aluminum rear control arm. Again, a bearing dowel loom system, very lightweight, very strong. We use these in autocross, drag race, in a number of applications, mainly because of the weight. In the front of all these, where it attaches to the frame, you have a spherical bearing, and that bearing allows the control arm to tilt easily, so there's no bind. And that's one of the things we need to achieve, is no bind in the rear of that suspension. And we have a frame that we're going to show you of how they attach, and this happens to be a frame that has the Penske coilover system that we offer, which we're going to talk about in another video. But let's go ahead and take a look at that frame. So this is the TBC4, and you can see the notch right here. This goes to the inside. This is where the stock sway bar would normally attach. The dowel loom bushing goes to the rear end, and then the bearing system will attach here up at the frame. If you'll notice the grease fitting here, it's always easy to know which way these arms go because the grease fitting goes down, so it's easy to lube. So we're going to go ahead now, and I'm going to flip this frame around, and I'm going to rotate it so you can see how easy the differential can pivot when you're running this type of suspension. Okay, so I've got the stand flipped around here so you can see the back of the differential. And one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to grab onto the axle tube here, and I'm going to pivot this so you can see how easy it is to move. The bearing system that we have, that we've shown you, allows for this action to take place. If you had other types of bushings in this application, you would not be able to do this. Okay, so we demonstrated the ability of this suspension to pivot properly by using these components with the bearing systems. There's three steps. This is step one, is doing the lower control arms. There's a video on step two and step three, which happen to be the upper control arms and the pivot in the differential. So you may want to take a look at those videos. Very important for A bodies to have free movement in reference to the differential. Reduces ride harshness and improves cornering ability. And it also takes the load out of the framing on a drag racing application because a lot of twisting action goes on there. And if there's a bind in the rear suspension, that goes right into the frame pickup points. Something you should look at, especially if you want your A body to handle well and ride properly.